welcome to this very special episode. As you can see, we are here in the cockpit of Spicejet, and not just any Spicejet aircraft, the brand new 737 MAX. And with me, we have Ajay Singh. Mr. Singh, thank you so much for joining us. And this is a very special, day for you because you've bought these 205 aircrafts. Tell us a little bit about it, about the purchase, and also at a time when fuel prices are so high, how will it help in terms of reducing fuel costs, etc.?
Well, as you know, we've ordered 205 aircraft. This is the 737 MAX aircraft. It's the new technology from Boeing. This has several great features, both for the airlines as well as for consumers. As you said, the fuel burn for this aircraft is a lot less. We'll burn 14% less fuel, which is incredibly important at this crazy time when oil prices have gone up and are so high now. In addition to that, this is truly a green plane. So this has a far smaller noise footprint, about 40% smaller noise footprint. The NOx emissions are significantly lower, about 30-40% lower than the old plane. So I think from an airline's perspective, it's a lower cost plane, both in terms of fuel burn as well as in terms of engineering cost, which is about 25-30% lower for this aircraft. And therefore we believe that it benefits Spicejet, but it also benefits consumers because they're flying in a quieter plane.
But lower cost is something that you guys have been doing for a while, right? Even in the quarter gone by, you were the only airline that actually managed to hold on to your yields. What are the cost reduction plans that the company has going forward?
Well, at this time, I think the most important plan for us is that we induct more and more of these aircraft so that the cost of fuel comes down. We also want to fly to destinations that have lower VAT, states, airports that have lower VAT on aviation turbine fuel. We need to try and figure ways of increasing revenue. I think that's critical for the aviation sector today, that some of the costs, the additional costs that we've incurred as a consequence of the rupee depreciating and the oil price going up is passed on to consumers. And we believe that that should happen soon as the festive season kicks in. Airlines will try and take up fares. Today the fares are absurdly low. Sometimes it costs more to travel by taxi to the airport than it does to fly from one airport to the other.
It does.
At an average of 3,700 rupees Delhi Mumbai.
But why is the industry not coming together and raising prices together? Because at a time when crude prices are so high, demand is so strong, why can't this effort be made together to sort of make the pricing system a bit more rational?
I think what tends to happen is that there are some players who are getting a lot of capacity in the market, and because they need to fill those planes, they try and sell cheap, and that keeps the fares depressed. I think there is a general sentiment in the industry that fares need to go up. They really do need to go up, and I believe that it should happen really soon.
So you're saying fares will go up very soon?
Fares will go up, and I think they will become more rational than they are today.
Is it true that in the last 15 days, we do 15-day data of the fares moving for 500 domestic routes. We've noticed that cumulatively a lot of the companies have increased prices by an average of around 1,500 rupees. Is that correct, and is that something that will sort of translate into better earnings in the December quarter?
I think that all airlines are looking for opportunities to pass on some of the additional cost. And I'm not sure about the 1,500 rupee number, but remember that we are coming off a weak period of flying, which is the September month is the weakest. There's also a Shraddh period which ended sort of on 8th of October. So you will see yields hardening and hopefully better earnings for the December quarter than you will see in the September quarter.
Okay, I'm going to come back to earnings in a bit, but I want to take up one point you mentioned, that you're going to fly to routes where there's a lower VAT. What do you see as the move from the government?
Well, I think that the government is quite sympathetic, and government, aviation has been one of the great success stories of this Modi government. And, India has been the fastest growing aviation market in the world for the last several years. The Udan scheme has made so many airports accessible where flights never flew before. Spicejet itself is a leader in Udan, and we've gone to so many new airports. You would have heard about Pakyong, which we just started, and yesterday we started Ajmer, which is at Dargah Sharif, that airport. And so there are so many which are getting added to the network, Kanpur, Jalandhar, so many that we ourselves started. So it's a huge success story for the Modi government, and I would think that there would be concern if this success story or if this sector was hugely impacted and the government did very little. It's important that all airlines around the world have the benefit of having aviation fuel at a much lower cost, because it is either they are not taxed on aviation fuel, or if they are taxed, then aviation fuel is part of their GST regimes, and therefore they get input credit. So the net effective tax on ATF is zero. So we need that to happen in our country. We are speaking to government on both the issues, which is that on excise duty on ATF used to be 8%. It was high, but it was 8%. And as oil prices came down, they increased it. So as oil prices have gone back up again and the rupee is depreciated as well, we've requested that this be brought down to 8% again. It's for government to see what is to be done. It's not only the central government, it's also the state government. Many state governments actually took up VAT the time oil prices came down. So for example, this airport where we are today, the VAT used to be 20%. They took it up to 25%, and this is an airport where there's a lot of traffic, so it made a big difference.
Yes.
So we are looking to states as well. There are certain states which have started to reduce VAT on ATF. Telangana and Andhra have 1% VAT now. Uttar Pradesh has launched a new scheme where they've said that flights going to every new destination will have zero VAT. West Bengal has reduced VAT by 50% on additional ATF that you uplift from that state. So there are states which are looking at this, and of course flights will shift to states where the cost is lower.
So what are the issues? So there's talk of no import duty on the engineering parts, giving an infrastructure status to the aviation sector. Do you think any of that will help at all?
Of course it will help. Of course, the import duty on IGST, which has been imposed on engineering components. Now, what happens is that this used to be zero. Once the GST regime came, they imposed this IGST on engines. So, an engine typically goes through its life 2 or 3 times. It goes for a shop visit. Every time it comes back, if you tax it, then it becomes extremely expensive. And we have raised this with government and said, look, there is no repair facility within our country. We need to send it out. No country in the world taxes, aviation services like this. So we hope that some of these, issues will be looked at and changes made.
So until some of these issues get resolved, with the way crude prices are headed, with the way the rupee has moved, you think that this industry is headed for much more in terms of losses? And for Spicejet as well, I mean, you've been relatively doing better than the others, but do you see more losses in the quarters to come?
Just as we look to government for assistance, both central and state government, we have to do our own part. And that is that we need to reduce cost. So one thing that we are doing to reduce cost is to get more of these new planes in. Because these planes burn 14% less fuel, as I said to you. Engineering cost is about 30% less. So because of that, the overall cost comes down more than 10%. So that is something that airlines have to do. They have to get new technology. They have to try and reduce their own cost base. And more importantly, they need to increase their fares. There's no, when there is a market with such terrific demand, you can keep putting in planes and keep filling them, right? Market has been growing 20% year on year, and it is the fastest growing market in the world. In such a market, if an average fare between Delhi and Mumbai is 3,700, 3,800 rupees, I don't think demand will really be impacted if you take it to 42 or 4,300 rupees.
Absolutely, yeah.
So this is something for the airlines to be responsible and do for themselves. And I think importantly for the larger carriers to take the lead.
Okay, yeah. So you're saying that in the near future there will be a cumulative effort by the companies to sort of increase fares. Are we talking about the end of this aggressive pricing regime?
I think the aggressive pricing is part and parcel of the growth of aviation, and there will always be tickets sold, to new destinations. When you try and get in new flyers into the mix, there will always be aggressive pricing, but we are hoping that the pricing can be much more rational than it is today, and I fully expect that in October you will see a rise in fares.
Okay, that's good to hear. In the past you've also said that you see a lot of Spicejet's revenues increasingly come from the ancillary business, from the cargo business. What are your plans there? How much would the investments be, and eventually what percentage of revenues would come from there?
Well, the way we look at it, ancillary revenue is something that's key to low-cost airlines, and cargo is an incredibly important part of that. So two pieces that we are especially looking at. One is the Spice, this plane itself, the MAX aircraft, has more seats on premium economy. So hopefully that helps us improve. It's a really nice product now. Much more legroom, cushions,
Wi-Fi,
and Wi-Fi, and very soon onboard broadband internet service, because it's fully equipped for that. We're just awaiting a government clearance. So we will work hard on the ancillary pieces. Cargo is really important. As you know, we launched a freighter service recently, and we will be adding to that. And we expect fully that this whole cargo and logistics business will be a reasonably high margin business for us.
Okay, well, we're going to take a short break. But before we do that, since we are sitting in the cockpit, I have to ask you, this is the first time I'm sitting in the cockpit. Have you flown a plane before?
I have not flown a plane. I have not dared to. I have tried to fly it, however, in a simulator. I wasn't the best at it. I need to take more lessons, clearly. And a simulator is like really realistic. So if you actually crash a plane when you're flying there, it behaves exactly like a plane would behave. So the sirens go off, the smoke starts to come out, and
so the blood pressure goes up.
Oh yeah, it's a terrifically real experience. My daughter flies. She's learning how to fly, and I hope one day I will get time to.
So
to
since
learn
you have
well.
been in a simulator, I'm sure you know how this functions. Flying for dummies. If you had to tell us a couple of buttons here and there, what stands for what? And if I had to fly a plane right now, what's the first thing I have to do?
Well, as you can see, this is a glass cockpit that they have now. It gives you a whole host of data. It tells you how much fuel there is in each engine. What is the speed you're flying, what is the direction you're flying. You see, if you look at this says heading, so you just change it to change the direction of the plane.
Okay.
This is an altitude meter. So what you do is that you just twirl this button, and pretty much you can decide which altitude you need to get to. So if you just twirled it back and said 1,000, so the plane will start to descend by itself to 1,000.
Looks pretty simple.
It's actually, the plane pretty much flies itself. These are really automated pieces of equipment now, and they do a fabulous job flying themselves. In fact, they can pretty much land themselves as well.
Are you trying to say that you don't need pilots anymore?
We are actually moving towards a regime where in the US they are experimenting now with single pilot aircraft instead of two. And over time, the way Uber and all are experimenting with pilotless, driverless cars. People are actually seriously speaking, and we were at the Boeing factory, and they were actually speaking about pilotless aircraft in the future.
I don't want to be the first one.
So we don't want to be I personally, I would be very scared to fly in an aircraft of this sort, but that's probably just my old world thinking, and the new generation probably won't care to who flies them. But these are very automated aircraft, really high tech.
Okay, so before we end, what about all this? What are all these 100 buttons here? You don't know.
There are just too many of them for me to tell you what's happening here.
Okay guys, that was Flying 101 for Dummies by Ajay Singh. But we are still in conversation with Ajay Singh of Spicejet. He just showed you how to fly a plane, but now he's going to tell you how to sustain the business. Ajay, you were talking about how you're planning to rationalize costs further. Tell us a little bit more about the business angle of it. How much do you think costs could go down? You spoke about fares going up in the near term, but purely from a Spicejet perspective, what is the plan?
Well, the plan is to take down cost, as you said, by inducting this new aircraft. We get our fuel burn down by about 14%. We get engineering cost down by about 30%. So the longer term plan is to get more and more of these aircraft in the fleet, and thereby reduce cost by about 10%, overall cost by about 10%. The plan also is to increase revenue, both passenger as well as ancillary revenue. We hope to achieve, as fares rationalize throughout the market, we hope that fares can be rationalized by up to 15% over what they are today. And that will give significant margin to Spicejet. In addition to what we as airlines are doing, of course, there are certain steps that we've requested both the state and the central governments to take as well. The state governments that actually had raised the VAT When oil prices had come down, we've requested them to lower that VAT again. There are certain states which are taking the initiative of reducing VAT to zero for certain routes, for new routes, and for in the case of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, they've reduced it to 1% across the board. Uttar Pradesh has, for all new flights, reduced it to zero for all new flights. On the central government's part, we've requested that the excise duty used to be 8% on ATF. It was taken up as oil prices fell. So the request is that they bring it back to 8%. And there are certain new duties which have been imposed, which had been imposed at the time that the GST legislation came into existence. And these include IGST on import of repaired components and various other small issues. And these used to be zero duties in the past. So we've requested that be brought back to zero duty. So we'll see how it goes, but we expect that the government, because aviation has been such a huge success story for this government in terms of the growth, in terms of the new airports being added, in terms of the new consumers being added to flying, and in terms of the sheer impact it has had on both tourism as well as the economies of states, that the government would take a view which is sympathetic. And essentially, what we are asking for is not something which is a dole. This is something that basically puts us on par with airlines around the world. I think critical element that we need to bring aviation turbine fuel under GST. I think that's the biggest ask.
But politically, that doesn't seem to be very feasible at the moment,
as long as there is a scheme by which they don't lose too much revenue, I would think that they should look at it.
You think it could happen anytime soon?
Let's hope so. I mean,
so the industry is not
every
ruled
time
out.
there is an adversity, I think there is an opportunity as well. And when things are so bad for this sector that nobody wants to see die, I think it's the government will look at some of these ideas, and even if they were politically less palatable few months and even few weeks back, maybe they need to take a relook.
If you were in the government's place, what would you do to address the issues that Air India is facing, for example, or Jet Airways is facing? What would the logical solution be? You think consolidation is the need of the hour? I
think the solution really is to try and impact the industry as a whole and not focus on individual airlines. We need to create an environment where airlines can flourish and grow. So we need to take out all this, this mindset that flying is something which is for the rich. And that has been the root cause of high taxation in the system. Now, if you see the kinds of people who are flying, it's certainly the middle class that flies. And therefore, you need to get out of people's heads this concept that rich people fly. And I think if you can do that, you can get a more rational tax regime. And remember that we are increasingly competing with the airlines around the world.
I don't think rich people fly anymore. Flying has become much more cheaper than even traveling by train.
And sometimes even, it costs you more to take a taxi to the airport than to fly from one destination to the other. So the fares need to be much more rational. And we need to have a level playing field with peers around the world, because we are increasingly competing with them as we fly international. This aircraft itself, will be flying Delhi-Hong Kong. We are the first low-cost airline to do that. But, how do you compete with an airline which has zero tax, on the Hong Kong side, right? Whereas we domestically are paying such large tax. So it's or and import duties and other such costs. So we need to get a level playing field, and I believe that if Indian carriers are given a level playing field, they would be amongst the best in the world.
So you don't see any of these, lastly, before we end this conversation, you don't see any of these airlines going the Kingfisher way?
I don't know. I mean, I can't say what will happen to these airlines. Certainly, Air India is supported by the government,
yeah,
and as long as Air India is supported by the government, Air India will continue to be. It is an incredibly important brand and airline. It is India's designated flag carrier. Not that we are not flag carriers; we all carry the Indian flag on our tails. But it's.
I was talking more about Jet Airways than Air India.
I don't want to comment on Jet Airways other than to say that the promoter of Jet Airways is a very strong promoter. He's a very experienced person, and he's dug himself out of several holes in the past when things were not going well for the aviation sector. So I don't think anybody should rush to count him out.
Okay. On that note, thank you so much, Ajay Singh, for joining us, and all the best. Congratulations once again on all these new aircrafts.
Thank you so much.